pista de vuelo a la pista de abrazos más grande del mundo. De millones de metros construidos a millones de familias que hoy ven las estrellas más cerca. De conectar vías con otras a conectar un hola con un bienvenido. Siéntete como en casa. De 250 megavatios solares a más de 6 millones de árboles sembrados para respirar un aire más limpio, más puro. De eso se trata Transformar, de invertir en proyectos que cambian la vida de las personas, de innovar aportando valor a la sociedad y de crear más oportunidades para todos. Grupo Argos. Inversiones que transforman.
Quizás alguna vez hayas escuchado decir que la belleza está en los ojos del espectador. Es verdad. Quizá es por eso que vemos las cosas tan diferentes. Vemos, por ejemplo, que detrás de cada una de las historias que se viven en un aeropuerto, un reencuentro, una nueva bienvenida o una despedida que no será para siempre, está el esfuerzo de quienes lo imaginaron, de quienes lo construyeron, pero sobre todo, está el compromiso de un grupo de personas que lo hicieron posible. Porque sabemos que más que cumplir promesas, estamos cumpliendo sueños. Vemos que más allá de la luz que ilumina la mesa de una familia reunida en la noche, brilla la inspiración de un grupo de personas que saben que su esfuerzo significa la posibilidad de un mejor mañana. Donde algunos solo señalan una carretera, nosotros vemos un grupo de personas que entendieron que su trabajo es un vehículo de progreso. Personas convencidas de que no podemos prometer una conexión si no damos ejemplo de ella. Porque sabemos que cada metro construido es el reflejo de nuestra integridad. Todo lo que somos es algo simple y potente que se resume en una sola palabra que siempre ha estado ahí y que hoy toma más relevancia que nunca. Grupo. La trascendencia de nuestros actos solo es posible si sumamos nuestras voluntades para construir una fuerza de grupo, para ver más lejos, para ver mejor, para entender que cada acción, que cada inversión que hacemos implica una transformación que hace del mundo un mejor lugar para todos. Somos Cultura Grupo. Grupo Argos. Inversiones que transforman.
Bienvenido al webinar con Raj Sisodia, líder a nivel mundial de la teoría del capitalismo consciente. Este espacio es llevado a usted en nombre de Grupo Argos para ofrecerle reflexiones sobre la forma en que los negocios impactan y transforman la vida de millones de personas. Envíenos sus preguntas en Twitter usando el numeral Inversiones que Transforman y etiquetando nuestra cuenta @grupo_argos o al correo comunicaciones@grupoargos.com. Esta conferencia es para usted. Lo invitamos a disfrutarla solo en este espacio, evitando realizar grabaciones completas o parciales. Grupo Argos. Inversiones que transforman.
De una pista de vuelo a la pista de abrazos más grande del mundo. De millones de metros construidos a millones de familias que hoy ven las estrellas más cerca. De conectar vías con otras a conectar un hola con un bienvenido. Siéntete como en casa. De 250 megavatios solares a más de 6 millones de árboles sembrados para respirar un aire más limpio, más puro. De eso se trata Transformar, de invertir en proyectos que cambian la vida de las personas, de innovar aportando valor a la sociedad y de crear más oportunidades para todos. Grupo Argos. Inversiones que transforman.
Quizás alguna vez hayas escuchado decir que la belleza está en los ojos del espectador. Es verdad. Quizá es por eso que vemos las cosas tan diferentes. Vemos, por ejemplo, que detrás de cada una de las historias que se viven en un aeropuerto, un reencuentro, una nueva bienvenida o una despedida que no será para siempre, está el esfuerzo de quienes lo imaginaron, de quienes lo construyeron, pero sobre todo, está el compromiso de un grupo de personas que lo hicieron posible. Porque sabemos que más que cumplir promesas, estamos cumpliendo sueños. Vemos que más allá de la luz que ilumina la mesa de una familia reunida en la noche, brilla la inspiración de un grupo de personas que saben que su esfuerzo significa la posibilidad de un mejor mañana. donde algunos solo señalan una carretera, nosotros vemos un grupo de personas que entendieron que su trabajo es un vehículo de progreso. Personas convencidas de que no podemos prometer una conexión si no damos ejemplo de ella. Porque sabemos que cada metro construido es el reflejo de nuestra integridad. Todo lo que somos es algo simple y potente que se resume en una sola palabra que siempre ha estado ahí y que hoy toma más relevancia que nunca: grupo. La trascendencia de nuestros actos solo es posible si sumamos nuestras voluntades para construir una fuerza de grupo, para ver más lejos, para ver mejor, para entender que cada acción, que cada inversión que hacemos implica una transformación que hace del mundo un mejor lugar para todos. Somos Cultura Grupo. Grupo Argos. Inversiones que transforman.
Bienvenido al webinar con Raj Sisodia, líder a nivel mundial de la teoría del capitalismo consciente. Este espacio es llevado a usted en nombre de Grupo Argos para ofrecerle reflexiones sobre la forma en que los negocios impactan y transforman la vida de millones de personas. Envíenos sus preguntas en Twitter usando el numeral Inversiones que Transforman y etiquetando nuestra cuenta @grupo_argos o al correo comunicaciones@grupoargos.com. Esta conferencia es para usted. Lo invitamos a disfrutarla solo en este espacio, evitando realizar grabaciones completas o parciales. Grupo Argos. Inversiones que transforman.
De una pista de vuelo.
Hola a todos, un saludo muy especial. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos. Les habla Iván Trujillo, gerente de Relaciones Institucionales y Comunicaciones del Grupo Argos. Les doy la bienvenida a todos a este webinar con el profesor Raj Sisodia sobre Capitalismo Consciente. Este es un evento que está programado para durar 2 horas. Va a iniciar con unas palabras a cargo de Jorge Velásquez, presidente del Grupo Argos. Después le daremos la palabra a Raj Sisodia para que presente su conferencia, que tendrá una duración estimada de 1 hora. Posteriormente vamos a tener un espacio de sesión de preguntas para luego darle la palabra nuevamente a Jorge Mario, quien va a dar unas reflexiones finales y cerrará el evento. Hi Raj, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar. We're thrilled and very happy to have you joining us today. I see that we have a large crowd and audience today, which is following this webinar and your conference today. I'm sure people are really excited to get to know a bit more about this comprehensive philosophy, which is conscious capitalism. I was just explaining the audience the mechanics of this event, and I think we are all ready and all set to begin the event just right after we display our corporate video. Thank you once again, and I hope you enjoy this webinar. Muchas gracias y vamos con el video.
Los más grandes del mundo. De millones de metros construidos a millones de familias que hoy ven las estrellas más cerca. De conectar vidas con otras, a conectar un hola con un bienvenido. Siéntete como en casa. De 250 megavatios solares a más de 6 millones de árboles sembrados para respirar un aire más limpio, más puro. De eso se trata transformar, de invertir en proyectos que cambian la vida de las personas, de innovar aportando valor a la sociedad y de crear más oportunidades para todos. Grupo Argos. Inversiones que transforman.
Jorge Mario, bienvenido con tus palabras. Gracias.
Muy buenos días a todos, Iván, Raj, a todos los colaboradores, amigos que nos acompañan en el día de hoy en esta conversación. Quiero darles una muy especial bienvenida a todos ustedes a este webinar que hemos promovido en Grupo Argos. Es además un enorme placer contar con la presencia de Raj Sisodia. Yo espero que esta sea una gran oportunidad para conocer de primera mano los planteamientos de Raj alrededor del capitalismo consciente, esa filosofía que nos habla y nos invita a reflexionar sobre no solamente el rol actual y pasado de las empresas, sino el rol futuro. Es esa propuesta de transformación que nos invita a pensar cuál va a ser el rol del sector privado en el futuro inmediato de nuestros países y de cómo podemos influir positivamente en nuestra sociedad. De esta manera me permito introducir rápidamente a Raj. Raj Sisodia es un distinguido profesor del programa de negocios globales del Babson College en Massachusetts. Nuestro invitado del día de hoy es cofundador y líder además del movimiento del capitalismo consciente que fundó y creó y conceptualizó compañía de John McKee, que fuera el CEO y fundador de Whole Foods. El trabajo de Raj ha sido fundamental en el pensamiento empresarial, no solamente en el capitalismo consciente, sino además para dar vida a movimientos de pensamiento alrededor de cómo la empresa privada puede ejercer simultáneamente ese rol de generación de valor financiera, de superar los costos de capital, de hacer una operación que al mismo tiempo se centre en modelos que consideren el ser humano y lo social como parte fundamental, articulándose adecuadamente para conseguir esa generación de valor de múltiples grupos de intereses. Esa visión que nos invita a la administración del multicapitalismo, de tener que administrar múltiples capitales simultáneamente alrededor de la actividad empresarial, no solamente el financiero, también el humano, también el ambiental, también el social. Raj es un consagrado escritor, ha editado varios libros importantes de su autoría, más de 100 artículos académicos que publica con frecuencia, no solamente en revistas, sino en periódicos como el New York Times o el Wall Street Journal. De manera que le agradecemos profundamente esta oportunidad y este espacio que yo particularmente quiero invitar para que sea un espacio de reflexión. Un espacio de reflexión hoy yo diría que más vigente que nunca alrededor de cuál es el rol de los negocios y de las empresas en la sociedad. Para nosotros en Grupo Argos profundizar en el entendimiento y en la visión de cómo podemos desde el sector privado ser unos actores relevantes, propositivos para generar transformación social y económica es parte de nuestro ADN. En Grupo Argos creemos profundamente en un valor que hemos definido explícitamente, que denominamos la trascendencia, y que tiene que ver con ese sentido de que el empresario moderno no solamente tiene una responsabilidad en la generación de utilidades económicas, sino que simultáneamente tiene una gran responsabilidad de impactar positivamente la sociedad, la gente y el planeta. Yo pienso que esta invitación que queremos hacerles hoy toma especial relevancia y profundidad en el momento que estamos viviendo como humanidad a nivel global y también como país y a nivel de nuestras empresas y nuestras ciudades y nuestra sociedad en particular. Creo que hoy se pueden escuchar permanentemente discusiones que vuelven a traernos a la mesa las visiones de cuál debe ser el papel del empresario, discusiones que pasan desde aquellas teorías impulsadas por Milton Friedman o George Stigler en los modelos de la Escuela de Chicago, que tal vez rechazaban todos los modelos keynesianos de intervención estatal y dejaban en la libre empresa el rol principal de su función, hasta otros pensadores como Thomas Piketty y demás que nos invitan a unas reflexiones profundas sobre la desigualdad económica y la profundización de las brechas de los sistemas económicos que hoy vivimos en el mundo. Raj, yo creo que nos invita hoy a una conversación balanceada, a una conversación trascendente, profunda, sin extremos, pero además enormemente oportuna para el momento que estamos viviendo. Yo simplemente veo, como seguramente todos nosotros, con gran preocupación en este momento cómo en nuestro país pues, más de 1.000 conciudadanos han fallecido, cerca de 30.000 o algo más colombianos están contagiados del virus que nos afecta en nuestro país y en la humanidad en general. Y eso, además de la tragedia humana y de salud, tiene unas implicaciones económicas muy profundas. Los crecimientos del Producto Interno Bruto de nuestra nación en el primer trimestre pues fueron impactados a nivel nacional y a nivel de los resultados de las empresas. Y cuando uno mira las proyecciones de cierre del año, seguramente vamos a tener impactos importantes. Las proyecciones varían en predicciones de caídas de nuestro Producto Interno Bruto entre el 3 o el 10%. Pero tal vez el aspecto que más toca los corazones y los sentimientos de los empresarios y de los ciudadanos hoy es estar viendo la pérdida de empleo de más de 5.4 millones de colombianos desempleados, con una tasa de desempleo que llega cerca del 20%, una de las más altas en las últimas décadas, pero que se suma a una particularidad circunstancia que tiene nuestra nación, y es el nivel de informalidad. Cuando uno considera que de los 23 millones y algo de ocupados que hay en nuestro país, el 48%, 11 millones, lo hacen en condiciones vulnerables y de no formalización de informalidad. Yo creo que las preocupaciones pasan de un simple análisis de contexto de datos estadísticos a ver materializada el sufrimiento de muchas personas. Y la invitación que yo quisiera hacer es que no nos quedemos en la contemplación de estos datos que posiblemente nos preocupan a todos, sino que miremos cómo alrededor de las crisis, cuando se abordan con una visión de largo plazo, de optimismo, de cohesión, de sentimientos de solidaridad y de empatía, pueden de estas situaciones, como nos lo ha demostrado la historia, salir reformas y salir acciones que nos hagan más fuertes, que como sociedad nos hagan abordar problemas estructurales que tenemos y nos hagan construir una sociedad donde los sentimientos de solidaridad y de empatía puedan ayudar a cerrar esas brechas sociales que tenemos. Yo particularmente creo y quiero invitarlos a que profundicemos ese rol que el sector privado y el liderazgo privado puede tener en convertirse en un actor relevante en la construcción de esa mejor sociedad. La discusión hoy para el empresariado no solamente pasa, como es lógico, por un mundo cambiante en todas las fuerzas de los negocios, cuando vemos tendencias globales que se van moldeando y profundizando, como la digitalización, la transformación tecnológica, los modelos de comercio en línea, a los cuales no somos ajenos para adaptar nuestros negocios a esas nuevas realidades, poderlos hacer rentables y continuar siendo sostenibles y crecientes. Pero también, simultáneamente, quiero invitarlos a que continuemos reflexionando, como muchos empresarios en Colombia lo hacen, en esa necesidad de construir desde el empresariado un rol de liderazgo consciente de lo humano y que profundice su liderazgo para ayudar a construir una sociedad próspera y a retomar el camino de crecimiento y de bienestar para todos. Yo creo que el capitalismo consciente que nos va a compartir Raj hoy es una filosofía que en esa dirección lo que hace es invitarnos a una acción potente de la empresa socialmente responsable como núcleo de organización social fundamental para la creación de mejores condiciones de vida para muchos compatriotas. Como Raj lo va a expresar seguramente, la empresa privada tiene un gran rol en lo que él llama la sanación o el healing en inglés, y es esa capacidad de que cuando hacemos empresas socialmente bien hechas, podemos tener una gran capacidad de ayudar a construir una mejor sociedad. El Grupo Argos en particular compartimos esta visión, la abrazamos, la involucramos en nuestros principios. Somos unos convencidos de la disciplina financiera, del rigor financiero, de las propuestas de valor modernas, innovadoras de los negocios, de la necesidad e importancia de que el sector privado genere utilidades sobresalientes en el aspecto económico, pero al mismo tiempo somos convencidos de que esa visión se complementa y se potencia muchísimo mejor cuando se acompaña de una visión holística de cómo poder, desde el liderazgo privado, impactar positivamente a otros. De manera que, habiendo dicho esto, yo simplemente les agradezco por acompañarnos, invitarlos a oír a un gran pensador en la filosofía empresarial, y sobre todo invitarlos a que cada cual pueda tomar elementos de esta conversación que les sirvan para enriquecer su papel como persona, como líder y como empresa. Muchas gracias, and Raj, thank you very much for sharing the time with us. It is very important for Colombian private sector, for our company, for our fellow citizens to share with you these moments, and thanks for letting us think a lot about the comprehensive view of how the private sector can heal and influence on the future of what we have to do to rebuild our society. So thank you very much, and pleasure having you here with us.
Thank you very much, Jorge Mario. I really appreciate the invitation, and thank you also to Grupo Argos. You know, this is one of the great companies that I have come to know about. It's really an exemplar of many of the things that I'm going to be talking with you about today. As we're at a moment in time when businesses need to, in a way, wake up, which means to confront the realities of our world, become awakened, become conscious. They have to grow up and show up, become part of the solution and not part of the problem. And I love the phrase transcendence, that, you know, the values of Grupo Argos are about transcendence. And I think that's really what we need to aspire to. We have to go above the levels that we have been operating in the past. So again, thank you very much for inviting me. Let me just share my screen. So our topic today is what I'm calling healing our world. I think we would all agree that our world is going through a tumultuous time right now. Most of us cannot remember such a time in our lifetime when things were as difficult as they are. Simultaneously, we are experiencing multiple crises. We, of course, have the pandemic, but at the same time, we have the accompanying economic crisis, which in many ways is as big as the Great Depression was in the United States. Certainly the numbers are like that. We also have a burgeoning social crisis that's been going on around the world with populist movements, with the economic unrest, where it's become a bigger problem than terrorism now is economic unrest that we've seen around the world. And I'll talk about that a little bit. In the US, of course, we are going through our own social crisis, which is a blend of economic, but also primarily social issues in terms of race relations. And of course, we also have a leadership crisis. At the center of dealing with all of these kinds of challenges is the question of leadership. And that's where I think we need conscious leadership of the kind you see embodied in Jorge Mario. We need to see that at companies. We need to see that in countries. So we're going to talk today about what is the role of business in healing our world going forward. A little background of myself. I think you already got that, so I won't talk about that anymore. I just want to give you a little bit of my backdrop, my story in terms of my work. which really started about 15 years ago. I've been a business professor about 35 years, but about 15 years ago, I discovered really the true path of my work, what I was meant to bring to the world, stumbling onto, in a way, my own purpose, starting with this book called Firms of Endearment, companies that are loved by everybody, customers, employees, communities, suppliers, etc. And what I discovered, the secret to that is that these companies have these principles that we now call the pillars of conscious capitalism. They have a purpose other than just making money. They care about the well-being of all of the stakeholders, not just the shareholders or the customers. They are deeply embedded in their communities. And they're led by leaders who are actually motivated by higher level things, transcendent values, and not just power and money. So this book, and they also showed, as we will talk about, that these companies are very successful. So that was the beginning for me. And that then led to the founding of the conscious capitalism movement. So that book came out 2007, and then 2008, we started the conscious capitalism movement. And then we published the book, Conscious Capitalism, in 2013. And then subsequently, I've done work in a multiple variety of areas related to these themes. One which I'll talk about a little bit later is this idea that we need to bring more feminine values and feminine perspective into leadership and into business. So this book, Shakti Leadership, was about embracing feminine and masculine power together, that combination into business. And then a book called Everybody Matters, which says the extraordinary power of caring for your people like family. And this was an industrial context, a company that manufactures machines that make toilet paper or cardboard boxes. And we showed how conscious capitalism and this idea of putting people at the center really works in every environment. It's not just for Whole Foods or Google or those kinds of companies, it's for every kind of company. And then we had a field guide that showed how do you implement some of these ideas. And then the most recent book, which is called The Healing Organization, Awakening the Conscience of Business to Help Save the World. And I'll focus on that for the second half of my talk today, because it's really kind of an extension of conscious capitalism. And if I have to articulate my personal purpose, it would be to bring heart, healing, and soul to business and leadership so we can build a better world for everybody, for all. And that's really, I think, to me, a purpose that can be quite universal. We need to bring this idea of heart and healing and soul, because business has primarily operated at an intellectual level, the head level, and primarily from a perspective of self-interest. So we need to change that. Of course, the pandemic and the virus on all of our minds, and we know that this is going to change a lot. It is already showing us that so many things that we believe, the mental models that we had, were actually wrong. We're showing that we can actually cooperate at a much higher level than ever before. We're showing that we can care at a deeper level. Many companies are showing up and caring and sharing with people in a deep way. We are doing things in a matter of weeks that we thought would take years. Right? So we've discovered within ourselves a capacity for rapid action, for widespread caring, for cooperation across companies, across sectors, across countries, etc. So this, again, in the face of a global crisis, humanity can unite. And so these are days when we challenge dogma. And the biggest sector I think we have to look at is business. How can we rethink? How can we use this crisis as an opportunity to affect fundamental change? And to me, this pandemic is reminding us ultimately of what we are here for on this planet. We human beings, we are here on this planet to take care of each other. And I strongly believe that. That is our role. That is what gives us deepest satisfaction in our life, to have a positive impact on the lives of others. And business is a way that we can do that at scale. In our normal life, we can care for 5, 10, maybe 15, 20 people. But if you start a company, you can care for thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of people, if you run that business and operate it with the right mindset, the right energy, if you build that business on love and care, and not just on self-interest. So again, business can be the greatest source of loving and caring and healing in the world if we do it in the right way. So if you think about the times that we're living in, and not only the last few months, but just the last few years, the general period of time that we're in, you would have to argue that this is in many ways the best possible time to be born a human being. Most of the indicators of human well-being are at historic highs: life expectancy, per capita incomes, education levels, etc. Right? So, and we have access to incredible technology. We can travel around the world. We can go into space. There's just so much. Humanity is in many ways at a peak of our existence in these times. But at the same time, we also know that we are facing massive challenges. Not only the short-term challenges of the pandemic and the economic crisis and the social unrest, but long-term challenges like climate change, right? Like species extinction. So in a way, as I'm reminded of Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, where he says it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. It's the age of wisdom and the age of foolishness, the season of light and the season of darkness, spring of hope, winter of despair. And the real question before us is, which of these roads will we take? Will we take the high road that leads towards greater flourishing for all life on this planet? Or will we continue on the road that we have been on for at least the last 100 years, 200 years, which has created financial wealth, but also created a lot of suffering at the same time? And that's really a core question that we're going to talk about. So before we talk about conscious capitalism, let's talk about capitalism itself, which is an idea that's actually not that well understood. Because remember, the word was coined by a critic, by Karl Marx, and is almost considered an insult to call somebody a capitalist. But capitalism simply is free markets and free people. And that idea has not been around that long, actually. So if you look at the economic history of the world for the last 2,000 years, you can see that per capita incomes for most of that time were below $500. What that meant was 90% of people lived on less than $1 per day for most of human history. And that's adjusted for inflation for the year 2000. So imagine living on $1 a day, right? And so most people lived extremely short, extremely difficult lives where they were always on the edge of survival. And you can see we went from the year 0 to the year 1000, no progress. We actually went backwards a little bit. Another 500 years go by. We start to wake up a little bit. We have the Renaissance starting in Italy. We have the invention of printing. We start to see humanity rise to higher levels. Right? We have Michelangelo painting the Sistine Chapel, and Leonardo da Vinci doing his things, etc. So huge steps ahead for humanity, but not having any impact on ordinary people. People still remain extremely poor and illiterate and just continuing their lives. We go another 200 years, we have the age of reason and enlightenment, science, Isaac Newton, Joseph Galileo, understanding the laws of nature, understanding our place in the universe. Again, huge leaps forward for humanity, but no impact on ordinary people. Then you go another 100 years and we enter the 18th century, and that's when things start to change. Around 1750, we had the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution in Scotland, where now for the first time we had machines that could make products rather than each product being made one by one. So that greatly increased our productive capacity. And so with that rise in productivity came a rise in prosperity. But that technology alone wasn't enough. We also needed an intellectual breakthrough. And that also came from Scotland. 1776, Adam Smith, who was a moral philosopher, published a book called An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations, asking the simple question, why do some countries prosper and others remain poor? And most people would have said, well, it has to do with natural resources, or it has to do with the work ethic. And he found that didn't explain prosperity. The reason people become prosperous, he discovered, was because of freedom. In societies where ordinary people enjoy greater freedom to determine the course of their own life, to decide what they want to focus on, and then to trade with each other, those societies would prosper. That people would lift each other up, they would meet each other's needs and lift each other up out of poverty. So this is one of history's great insights. Freedom leads to prosperity. These are two things that we want, and they go together. Now, that same year, 1776, also was the birth of the United States as an idea before it became a country. So this is the only country that exists because of a set of ideas. People who came together believed in freedom. Religious freedom, political freedom, economic freedom, right? So they created this country based on those ideas, and they implemented the ideas of Adam Smith and others, Renaissance thinkers from Europe, into this society, where democracy and capitalism, in a way, were now joined together, and they went hand in hand. And you saw then, from that point on, humanity has taken off. Per capita incomes have risen 1,500% in that time, much more than that in industrialized countries. Life expectancy has gone from about 28 to about 74. Worldwide literacy has gone from 13% to 87%, and the percentage of people still living in extreme poverty is down from 90% in 1800 to about 9% or less now. And so again, incredible progress. Billions of people have been liberated from extreme poverty. Billions of people are able to live lives that are richer, fuller, longer, and more meaningful because of this institution of capitalism. So we have to, again, appreciate what capitalism is and what it has done for humanity. And yet we also have to recognize that we're living through a time when a lot of people are very suspicious and even hostile towards capitalism. Confidence in big business, as measured by Gallup over the last 40 plus years, 47 years, you can see has actually steadily gone down, as low as 16% in the last financial crisis. That was about 23% last year. But what does that say? Even in the United States, the home of global capitalism, 77% of people don't trust big business. They think that companies are going to have a net negative impact on society, on their well-being. Right? So there's something that has gone wrong. This institution, this idea that is rooted in human freedom and dignity, has somehow, we've created a world where people are hostile, disengaged, disconnected, and suspicious of business. And we have many sad statistics to back that up. 88% of Americans feel they work for a company that doesn't see them as a human being, just sees them as a function or an object, right? You're an accountant, you're a marketer, you're a receptionist, whatever, but not as a sentient human being. And then if you look at the financial side of things, capitalism has delivered or created a lot of wealth, but if you look at the distribution of that wealth lately, certainly in the last 40 years or so, it has actually become very skewed. So 50% of Americans, and this is before the economic crisis that we're going through right now, so it's probably much worse now, but 50% of Americans had less than $400 in the bank and could not raise $2,000 within 30 days. A small problem becomes a life-changing crisis. Your car breaks down, your child gets sick, and you don't have insurance. You could lose everything. So people were living that close to the edge of financial ruin. So the fruits of this system of wealth generation were not reaching most people, even in the richest country in the world. Remember, the US was in an economic boom last year. Stock market was nearly 30,000. Unemployment was below 4%. And yet ordinary Americans were struggling. 65% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. And you can see the data here for over a 40-year period, worker pay is basically flat, right? While executive pay and CEO pay in the United States has gone up over 1,000%. And this is why you're starting to see all this unrest, right? We're starting to see the rise of populist leaders and populist movements. Because traditional American-style capitalism, which I would say is short-term oriented and very financially focused, it's all about shareholders and financial returns, is no longer working even for Americans, for the vast majority of Americans. They see themselves now as almost a victim of this. And you can start to see now that especially the younger generation in the United States is starting to think that maybe socialism is a better system than capitalism. Now, the fact is, we know that socialism, classic socialism, where the government owns a means of production and controls the entire economy, we know that doesn't work. That's only about the sharing or the distribution of wealth. It's not about the creation of wealth. It's not about innovation, and it's not about freedom. But people are so frustrated that they're even willing to look at things like socialism, right? So this is a problem, and we can see the economic unrest that is around the world. These are all scenes from various parts in Latin America, from Chile to Bolivia to other countries, right? There's just been a lot of, and by the way, these scenes are now happening in hundreds of United States cities as well. Right? There's just a tremendous amount of unrest out there. So why has this happened? Where did we go wrong? We have to examine our fundamental beliefs and our way of being in the world of business. As the well-known author James Baldwin said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. So we have to face up to what is the reality of what has happened here. Where did we go wrong? And I would argue that the story of business itself is where we went wrong. So if you think about what the story of business was for a long time, Calvin Coolidge was the president of the United States in the 1920s, which were the booming times, the roaring 20s, just before we got to the Great Depression. This was after the Spanish flu and before the Great Depression. We had a boom economy. And he was the president. He made a speech. He said, the business of America is business. If you think about it, it's really true. This is a country founded on freedom. It's about entrepreneurship. American kids grow up dreaming to create something big, right? That was always the case in the history of this country. But it is important to consider the question, what is the business of business? What is business all about? Okay, business of America is business. And there we have had for a long time the view that was expressed by Alfred Sloan, who built General Motors into the largest company in the history of the world at one time. And he said the business of business is business. What does that mean? It's only about making money. He said we make cars, but really it's about making money. Our job in business is just to make money and to make as much money as we can. And government's job is to do what they do, universities do what they do, everybody do your job and we'll be okay. Well, I think that's a very dangerous idea. And there's a better story of business, and this was articulated by Herb Kelleher, who was the founder and built Southwest Airlines into one of the most successful companies, I think, in the history of the world, and one of the greatest airlines. And he said the business of business is people, yesterday, today, and forever. It's all about human well-being. It's all about flourishing. Profits have to serve people. It's not people used to make profits. This is a simple but profound idea. If you think about it, it's like we have been putting profit at the center of the business universe. Everything revolves around that, including people. So it's like the Copernican revolution, right? Before Copernicus, we thought that the earth was the center of the universe and the sun revolved around the earth and everything revolved around, right? And then Copernicus said, no, actually the earth revolves around the sun. And that was seen as a heretical idea. Likewise here, we need to put people at the center. That is where they belong. Why are we doing anything if it is not to promote human and planetary well-being? As I said, we are all here to take care of each other. We're not here to use each other. We're not here to abuse each other, to extract value and exploit each other. We are here to take care of each other. So we need to put people at the center. That's what we lost sight of. Instead, we put profit at the center. And not only at the center, we said we must maximize profit. Milton Friedman said in 1970, the only social responsibility of business is to increase its profits. Okay, everything else is just a cost. Right? And this idea has done tremendous damage. It is a selfish way of thinking. It views people as a means to an end, instruments to create value and wealth. And it's a very narrow understanding of business. Business doesn't just create wealth. It has so many impacts on our lives. And the irony is that it doesn't even work. The more you obsess about profit maximization, if you're running your business, the less over time you will be able to be profitable. Because you're going to end up using people and squeezing people and using your suppliers. You're going to do all these things that are in the long run going to come back to hurt you. And we see this in a lot of research now that is showing up, right? That shareholder value has failed even on its own narrow terms of making money. This philosophy that business is about shareholder value maximization if you're a public company. You see this in the aggregate data in the United States. Over a 50-year period, you can see that return on assets have actually declined dramatically, even as shareholder value became the dominant way of thinking in the early 1970s. And not only has it not created financial wealth, it has actually created a lot of harm. This is a really good article that identifies 10 different ways in which shareholder value shareholder value maximization creates harms in society. The literature provides compelling evidence that governing companies, in order to maximize stock prices, can lead to severe negative consequences for all constituencies, including societies and shareholders themselves, but also including customers, including employees and their families, etc. So this is a very, very dangerous idea that we need to let go of. And we are letting go of it. There's a fundamental rethinking that is underway in the last few years. And our movement started in 2008. We've been part of that conversation. We believe that it has had an impact. And now people are coming around to this idea. Just in the last year, you've seen these kinds of headlines in all the major business magazines. And you've also seen the Business Roundtable, which is a collection of 183 of the largest public companies in the US, issue their statement in August that the purpose of business has to align with society, that it has to be about creating value for all stakeholders. These are principles that we have been articulating and others have been articulating for a long time, but they're now becoming adopted by mainstream business. We also saw from Davos in December, the new Davos Declaration is all about stakeholder capitalism, not shareholder capitalism. Right? So again, we are waking up from this nightmare that we were living, that this is only about this one thing and we have to use people and use the planet and do all this harm in order to make as much money as possible. No, we cannot do that anymore. We must not do that anymore. So the key thing is that we need to recognize that capitalism has been a powerful force. So we need to celebrate it. It has lifted billions of people out of poverty. Just in India and China alone, 1 billion people have been liberated from extreme poverty in the last 25 years. So we need to celebrate capitalism, but we also need to elevate it with higher consciousness. You know, any tool, the impact depends on the consciousness of the user. A scalpel can be used by a surgeon to save your life, and somebody else can use it to kill you. Capitalism is one of the most powerful tools we've ever created as human beings. We have to use it with the higher consciousness. What we don't want to do is to decimate it. We don't want to destroy it. We don't want to replace it and go to the other extreme with socialism, which leads to communism and government dictatorship. We know that doesn't work, but we need a combination. You know, as Jonathan Haidt said, capitalism promises and delivers dynamism. Socialism promises but cannot deliver on decency. Everybody has basic needs met. And what we want is dynamism with decency. And that can be done by conscious capitalism, by capitalism that is elevated in its consciousness. Then we can have true dynamic, greater dynamism, tremendous innovation, and true decency, where people are living in freedom and earning a good living and having meaning and purpose in their life through their work. So how do we solve this problem? As Einstein said, no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. So what was the level of consciousness behind the traditional capitalism? And what has changed now in the world? You know, so much has changed in the lifetime of most people. About 30 years ago, we went through a sort of a cataclysmic event. 1989 was a year when we had massive change in the world. The Berlin Wall was brought down. So that marked the end of the defining debate between communism and capitalism. Right? Democracy and freedom on the one side, and then government ownership and control on the other side. So 1989 was also the year of the invention of the World Wide Web. Right? It was also the year of the Exxon Valdez oil spill, awakening of environmental consciousness. Right? There are many, many things that happened. So the world has changed dramatically in the last 31 years. Right? And people have evolved. We've had technological revolution, the mobile revolution, right? People are becoming more intelligent. People are becoming more conscious. People are far more educated than ever before. Many, many more women in the workforce, etc. Right? Businesses haven't adapted to all this change. It's like we're still using an operating system that was developed in the 1800s, using the military as the organizing metaphor for business, where business was almost seen as a kind of war. The only large organizations that existed were armies. So we borrowed how do you lead, where it's command and control, how you organize, you have a hierarchical structure in the language of strategy, tactics, operations, front lines, headquarters. These are all military terms, right? The business is not war. We need to have a different operating system, a different way of thinking that aligns with where people are and where the needs of the planet and human beings are today. And one of the biggest changes that has happened in the world is the rise of feminine values. You know, this year, 2020 is the 100-year anniversary of the year when women got the right to vote in the United States, 1920. Think about that, 100 years ago, in this country, more than half the people in this country could not vote, right? So this is a relatively recent thing. The 19th century was about the end of slavery. The 20th century is about the end of communism and dictatorships, for the most part. The 21st century will be about the end of the sidelining of the feminine, where we have many more women coming into leadership now. 20 years ago, only one woman ran a Fortune 500 company. Now it's about 35. It's still a small percentage, but the number is rising. Many more women. Women now are 60% of college students. You know, 100 years ago, there were only about 20% of college students. Women are now outnumbering men in college just about everywhere in the world, except in South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. And in white-collar professions, women will statistically be the majority, already in the legal profession, in the medical profession, in education, in many professions. With that, we're going to see a shift in society. Because for millennia, for thousands of years, every institution in society has been run by men on a limited set of masculine values, which are domination, aggression, hyper-competition, winning, results at all costs, without regard to the impact on others, without regard to the impact on the future. And we need now the feminine values: nurturing, caring, compassion, empathy, inclusiveness. All human beings possess these values, but we have suppressed them. We have suppressed women, and we have suppressed them within men. We're not allowed to care. We're not allowed to be compassionate because those are seen as weakness. It is time that we have to move past that. We have to embrace feminine values. right? And there's a very good book called Athena Doctrine that said how women and the men who think like them will rule the future. And they interviewed 60,000 people around the world. And they asked 30,000, what do you consider to be the good traits of leaders? What do good leaders do? And they also asked 30,000 people, what is masculine and what is feminine? You can see in this chart, the so-called feminine values or qualities are strongly associated with better leadership. They're also better strongly associated with higher levels of morality and ethics. And they're associated with happiness. Think about that. We need this more than anything else in the world. I saw that the 9 countries which are doing the best in managing this coronavirus pandemic are all led by women, whether it's New Zealand or Germany or Iceland or Finland or Taiwan, etc. They saw this problem. They created a collective solution. They communicated with everybody, right? There was no denial. There was no, as we are seeing in countries like the United States and Brazil and many others, right? They are actually leading in a way that is very, very effective. So this is something that's a big, big thing in the world that we need to have. And by the way, it's not only masculine and feminine energy, there's also the elder energy and the child energy. I call these the 4 sort of archetypal energies that we have as human beings. The father energy, the mother energy, the elder energy, and the child energy. And we need to have all of these together in a symphony, in a good harmony. So we have wisdom and meaning and purpose, but we also have joy and playfulness that comes from our child energy. And then we have the mature masculine father energy of strength, courage, resilience, focus. And we also have the mature mother energy of love, compassion, caring, and inclusiveness. And we are also becoming more conscious as human beings. We are more mindful, we are awake, we understand the consequences of our action, we have a greater commitment to the truth, a better sense of right and wrong. 150 years ago, we had slavery all over the world, and then we abolished it. And now we cannot imagine having slavery. 100 years ago, as I said, women did not have the right to vote. 75 years ago, we had still had colonialism, which is another form of slavery in a way. India was a British colony. 50 years ago, we still had segregation in this country between blacks and whites. 30 years ago, we still had apartheid in South Africa. 15 years ago, we had no rights for gay people in most countries, right? Things are changing. We are waking up as human beings. We're becoming more peaceful, we're more inclusive, right? So a lot has changed. And as Lincoln said, the dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. As our case is new, we must think anew and act anew. When the world changes, we also need to change how we think about everything. We cannot have business as usual in any part of life because the world has changed so much. We have to reinvent. So that's where conscious capitalism comes in. We say, what are the 4 fundamental questions that we ask? Why, what, who, and how? And we need to ask these questions and come up with new answers when it comes to business. So in the old days, why was just about profits, right? And now we say, no, why has to be a higher purpose. Each of us human beings should have our own purpose in our life. I articulated mine earlier. Every business needs to have its own higher purpose. What are we trying to do that is needed? Why are we needed as a company? Why should we exist? Right? The world doesn't need another bank or another airline. There's enough. Why do we exist? Right? So what's our higher purpose? What do? We used to create value or wealth for shareholders. Now we say, no, we need to actually create wealth and value and of multiple kinds for all stakeholders, customers, employees, suppliers, communities, the environment, right? Who are we as leaders? Well, we achieve results and get numbers. No, we are people who create a vision and take people to a better place. We are conscious leaders who care about people and who care about purpose, right? And then how does it feel to work in our company? It used to be all about performance, all about productivity, but there's a lot of fear and stress in most cultures. And we say, no, we want caring cultures where people are excited to go to work, where there's a lot of trust and caring and authenticity. So for each of these, I have an acronym that kind of captures the qualities. And we'll talk about a couple of these. I won't go into leadership and culture today, but I'll talk about purpose and a little bit about stakeholders. So there's healing for higher purpose, spicy for stakeholders, selfless for leadership. You have to transcend the self, and then it stands for the qualities of great leaders. They are strong, they are energetic, they are loving, they are flexible, they are long-term thinkers, they are emotionally intelligent, spiritually intelligent, and systems intelligence. They possess all of those. And then cultures where tactile trust, authenticity, caring, transparency, integrity, learning, and empowerment. So purpose, this is a sort of a radical seeming idea here, that the purpose of business is not to make a profit. Think about that. Can that be true? The purpose of business is to actually produce profitable solutions to the problems of people in the world. So the focus is on profitable solutions, not on the profit itself, but on the solution that is profitable, because that makes it sustainable. That makes it self-sustaining as opposed to relying on donations, right? That's why it's a business. And certainly the purpose of business cannot be about making profits while we're hurting people or the planet. And that's what a lot of businesses unfortunately have done. Not intending to do so, but we have caused a lot of suffering. And I believe every great purpose has to be a healing purpose. And it stands for the qualities of a great purpose, but it also is motivated by this idea that every business should be a place that we reduce suffering. If you meet somebody's real needs, we actually reduce suffering in their lives. We make them whole. Reduce suffering, elevate joy, and enable healthy growth. And it stands for the qualities of a great purpose. It's heroic, it's evolving, it's aligning, it's loving, it's inspiring, it's natural, and it's galvanizing. It moves you to action. On the stakeholders, you can see that there's society, partners, investors. You can see that every one of these, there's a lot of challenges that exist. We see these kinds of favelas in many cities around the world, right? So society has many challenges, but we need to think about it in terms of having a positive impact on society. Partners, we think about them traditionally as we just use them, our suppliers and others, squeeze them if we have the power. No, we need to actually be in true partnership with our suppliers and other partners. Investors who only care about money. No, actually, we have to have investors who actually focus on the impact that they're having while generating returns as well as having a positive impact. Customers, we call them consumers, and their job is to consume as much as possible. No, we actually want to improve the quality of their life, not just make them buy as much as possible, improve their health and well-being. Employees who are bored and disconnected and mistreated and disrespected, actually we want them to be energized, enthusiastic, joyful at work. And a planet that we've been damaging and hurting for so long, we want to restore that and we want to bring it back to life, right? So those are the stakeholders of a business, and we have to think about creating value for all of them and serving them. Now, fundamentally, conscious capitalism boils down to this idea. It's a business built on love and care, not just self-interest. Right? Adam Smith talked about The Wealth of Nations was about people pursuing their self-interest, right? But he also wrote another book called The Theory of Moral Sentiments about the human need to care. The way I say it is, capitalism had a mother and a father. They were both Adam Smith. The father energy was in Wealth of Nations. Mother energy was in Theory of Moral Sentiments. But we forgot that. As we do in life, we often ignore our mothers. Right? But this is what we need to reconnect with. Can you build business on love and care? Most businesses operate on fear and stress, right? That's why we have this restaurant called Thank God It's Friday, right? We can't wait for the weekend. We can't wait to get out of work, because work for many people is almost like a prison. It's like torture, right? It's no fulfillment there. And we have shocking statistics that like heart attacks are 20% higher on Mondays. Our work is literally killing us. Think about that. This book, Dying for a Paycheck, came out last year. Estimated 120,000 Americans die every year from work. Stress connected to work. Not the work itself, but the way we lead, manage, and organize. This is the human cost of doing business. 600,000 Chinese die every year from overwork. 600,000 die from overwork. Think about that, the human cost. And then if it's not killing us, it's boring us to death. So if you look at Gallup's data on employee engagement, the United States is the highest in the world, 34% engagement, 53% don't care, 13% hate their work. Worldwide, only 15% of people are engaged. Right? And this is a massive human tragedy, I think. It's a financial drain, 500 billion of lost productivity. But more than that, it's a human tragedy. Work is important in a human life. And for most people, it is a drudgery. They don't have any meaning or joy connected to their work. And as Sigmund Freud said, love and work are the cornerstones of our humanness. This is what it means to be human. We're the only creature that works when we don't even have to for money, because work can provide us meaning. But for most people, we don't have that opportunity. So why can't we combine these two things? That's really been our journey in conscious capitalism. It's been my personal journey as well. When I wrote Ferns of Endearment, where people were describing companies using words like compassion, love, caring, soulful, joyful, and authenticity. And then at the end of that research, when we found 28 such companies, we said, okay, how do they do financially? They're paying their people better. They're paying much better benefits. They're providing much better care for their customers. They're investing in their communities. They're investing in the environment. They're paying their suppliers well. We said, maybe there's less money for investors. but they're creating a lot of other kinds of value. What we actually found was that these companies outperformed the market dramatically by 9-1 in the original book, and then the second edition with more companies, longer time period, over a 20-year period, 7.7 times outperformance over the S&P 500. Think about that. They are creating a lot of wealth, financial wealth, right? While they're also creating other kinds of value. So, this is important to say that conscious companies are highly profitable and successful. I heard Jorge Mario say that as well. These kinds of businesses succeed better, right? And profits are important. Without profit, society doesn't work. And these companies are very profitable. But profits, it matters how you make those profits. It matters how you make the money, because you can make the money by squeezing people and hurting them, because businesses create, but we also destroy many kinds of wealth. There's not only financial, but also intellectual capital. There's a social capital, trust and cohesion in society. There's emotional well-being, operating from love and care, not fear and stress in your life. There's spiritual well-being, having meaning and purpose through your work. Cultural impact. We spend $1.4 trillion a year on marketing in this country. There's a huge impact on the culture, what people think about life. The impact on our bodies, the impact on the environment. A conscious company tries to create positive impacts in all these areas for all of their stakeholders. And a traditional business says, well, we're all about making money and shareholder value, and therefore everything else that happens is a side effect. And as we know, side effects tend to be negative. Well, I'm sorry, there is no such thing on this planet called a side effect. Just because we call it a side effect doesn't make it less important. We do things and there are effects. So we need to do business with a spectrum of positive effects in all these areas. All 8 of those areas that I talked about, every one of them can and must be positive when we operate our business. So this kind of captures the sense of separation, the sense of complacency we've had in the past. You can see that those people on the right are safe and dry, and the people on the left are struggling just to survive, and they're saying, sure, glad the hole is not at our end. But the fact is, we're all in the same boat. This planet is one system. This pandemic is showing us that. Climate change is showing us that, right? We are intertwined. Our fates are intertwined. Humanity is one spirit. This planet is one system. We have to start acting that way every day, not just for these few months, all the time. Otherwise, we don't survive on this planet. So, after about 12 years of this journey, I would say 15 years for me with my research, but conscious capitalism started in 2008, we recognize that this really works, and it works for everybody, and that's important. And why does it work? It has a lot of very basic business reasons why it works. You can see sales grow faster. People love these companies. They want to work for them. They want to buy from them. They want to sell to them. They want to invest in them, right? Their gross margins are lower, but their net margins are higher. They don't have to spend a lot of money on marketing. They don't have to spend much money on employee turnover. People come there and they never leave. They stay. They become very productive, right? They have lower legal costs. Everybody trusts everybody. They don't have a lot of managers telling people what to do. People are self-organizing, self-managing, and self-motivating. They're much more resilient in tough times. So this is a way of doing business where everybody matters and everybody wins. Remember that business has to be done in a way that everybody wins, not just shareholders, not just customers. Even your competitors can win if you do business in the right way. Society wins. Other species wins. The planet wins. And with that, I want to spend the remaining time, we have about 20 minutes, on the healing organization. This is an extension of my own understanding and my own work, that I've come to realize that business ultimately is fundamentally about healing. Business is a way we take care of each other. Business is a way we meet each other's needs. When you meet somebody's needs, you make them whole. And healing is another word for wholeness. Steven Pinker is a professor here at Harvard, and he has written interesting books, The Better Angels of Our Nature, showing that we're living in the most peaceful time in human history. So we are more prosperous and more peaceful than ever before, but at the same time, psychic and planetary suffering are on the rise. Depression, drug addiction, anxiety, and suicides are rapidly increasing. Definitely in the United States, but really worldwide. Our planet is suffering at an extremely intense level. Think about that. We humans are unique on this planet in so many ways, but one of the negative ways we're unique is that we're the only species that actually destroys its own habitat. And we're decimating other species, all for the sake of economic prosperity and self-indulgence. And Brazil is now starting to destroy the rainforest. Right? I mean, we've done so much harm to our own ecosystem that sustains us, right? Just because we're trying to make as much money as possible. It's interesting that recently the Earthwatch Institute said, which is the most important creature in the world? It's not human beings, it's the bee. Bees are more important to human life on this planet than, to the survival of this planet than we are. Think about that. So after just 1 century of modern living, look at what the impact has been. On forests, 80% of them are gone. Some of them are replaced with newer forests, but they're not the same. What about our land? 30% of the land is unusable, arable land on which we used to produce food, we can no longer because of chemicals, because of desertification. Species, large mammals are down 90%. This is in 100 years. This planet has been around for what, 4 billion years? We in 100 years have caused these kinds of effects. Large fish are down 95%. And then of course we have factory farms where we have cattle and we have pigs and we have chickens. 75 billion animals and 100 billion fish are killed annually after living tortured lives on factory farms. I mean, if you look at the scenes from a factory farm, how those animals live inside cages, etc. I mean, we are torturing them before we eat them. And another 1 trillion live fish. And the impact of that, of course, on climate change and all of that. This is a humanitarian, there's a moral, ethical issue here, what we are doing to other species on this planet. Because it's not just what we're doing in the farms. Half the species that are with us today will be gone in 50 years. We are living through the 5th mass extinction of life on this planet. And the first one that is caused mostly by human activity. Think about that. And what's happening to human health? The toxic burdens on humans is rising. You know, during the Reagan administration, the President's Commission on Cancer estimated that 24% of Americans would get cancer in their lifetime. Under the Obama administration, the same commission came out with a renewed report. They said about 44% of Americans will get cancer in their lifetime. 50% of men will get cancer. And cancer is a result of toxins in our environment, in our water, in our food, in everything, right? The last 100 years, we have been conducting this experiment of how we live. And it's dramatically impacting our health. Pollution, in fact, kills 9 million people every year, 15 times more than wars and terrorism, all these other things, right? I mean, we talk about how many people will die from the pandemic, but pollution, which is created mostly by the way we run our businesses, is killing 9 million people every single year. Okay. So I believe we need to heal ourselves, we need to heal our families, we need to heal our communities. The need for healing is everywhere. We need to heal our companies. There's so much suffering inside companies. Our countries, the United States has never been more divided as a country politically than today. People in the same family don't talk to each other. Same is true in India, many other countries. We need to heal our planet and its ability to sustain life. We need to heal the past, the present, and the future. You know, the United States is going through these race-related riots right now. Why? Because we never healed our past. South Africa, at the end of apartheid, had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And therefore, they didn't have the same kind of violence afterwards. The United States, even after ending slavery, has never had that kind of a process. Truth and reconciliation. We need to heal the past before we can heal the present. So this crisis will only be resolved when we truly apologize and make amends for the suffering, 400 years of suffering that was imposed on Black Americans by the system and by white Americans, right, for most of that time. So we need to heal so much. I believe that we are all now healers. We all need to be healers. Whether you're a CEO like Jorge Mario, or whether you're a professor like me, or whether you are anything, lawyer, doctor, we are all healers. We all need to reduce suffering and elevate joy in our own way. As the Dalai Lama said, our prime purpose in this life is to help others. And if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them. But the reality is that we are out there hurting each other every day in so many ways, mostly in an unconscious way, because we don't even realize we're hurting, right? But I'd say if you don't choose to be part of the healing, you are part of the hurting. So we have to now consciously choose the way of healing. We have to say, I'm going to be a healing leader. You know, the saddest irony to me is that even the healing professions, doctors, nurses, veterinarians, have become places of suffering because of the way we run our hospitals and organizations. Doctors have a depression, drug addiction, and suicides are much higher for doctors and nurses and veterinarians. Think about that. They're doing meaningful work, they're living their purpose, they're healing other people, and yet they're killing themselves and hurting themselves because of the way we lead, manage, and organize our businesses and our organizations. This has to stop, and it can. And I believe that done right, business can actually reduce suffering and elevate joy. There's nothing that says that to have a business, you must have suffering, that work has to be difficult and painful and torture. No, business can actually be a place of joy, can be a place of fulfillment. And this is not about healing businesses. This is not about saying that we need more yoga studios and massage parlors and, organic food restaurants. No, this is about saying business as healing. Any business, doesn't matter what it is, can be done in a way that's healing, or it can be done in a way that's hurting. So I believe that business can be a place of healing for those who work there. You can leave at the end of the day, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and socially, better off than when you came in because of what happened at work. It can be a source of healing for those we serve, our customers, our communities. We can enrich their lives, make them happier, healthier, better. And business can be a force for healing in society. We can demonstrate how people can come together despite their differences, ethnic, religious, cultural differences. We can come together with a shared purpose and shared values and do incredible things. We can show how to do that in society. And it's happening right now in the US. Many, many companies are stepping up in the time of these race crisis that's going on. And they're saying, we are going to commit ourselves, that we are going to end this injustice forever. And we're going to make sure that all of our citizens are felt, they feel safe, they feel respected, they feel loved, right? This is a time when business can be a force for healing. In the book, we have about 25 stories of companies that are actually places of healing. And in our remaining time, I'd just like to share a couple of those stories because, their stories are ultimately very powerful, right? So this we call the parable of the pothole. Pothole is just something that we in life encounter. And it's sort of a metaphor, right? We're going along in our car and suddenly our car hits a pothole and the car is damaged and we could get hurt, etc. So life has potholes. Right now we're dealing with 3-4 potholes at the same time in the world, right? But this is a story of a company called Apple Tree Answers, which is the second largest call center company in the US. And it was created by the merger of many smaller companies. And the CEO was John Ratliff. And as he started to have a bigger company, he started to look at all the data about the company. And he found something that is actually a common pattern. He found that there were really 2 different cultures within the same company. So you have the white collar, college educated, professional, full-time employees in the offices, right, who are salaried and with benefits and with development plans and all kinds of perks. And then you have the 85% of the employees who are hourly paid, who actually answer the phone and do the work. Okay? So they're actually doing the work and the other people are managing them. And he found that life was very different for these 2 groups. He found that the employee turnover was very low for the white collar people, in the teens, but it was 118% for the hourly workers. He found that employee engagement was pretty good, about 60% for his salaried people, but only about 13% for the hourly people. So they're 2 distinct experiences. And he started to understand, why do they leave 118% turnover? By the way, industry average 158%. Right? He said, no, this has to change. So he started asking them, what can we do? Why are people leaving? And he started finding simple things that the chairs are very uncomfortable. It gives us a backache. So he said, okay, we're going to change the chairs. We're going to get better chairs. He said, every day, tell me something that we can do to make your life better. And soon he discovered that it really is about the financial reality of people that are making $10, $15 an hour and trying to survive and look after her family. So the example we use of that is that imagine if the chief financial officer of the company is driving to work one day in her Mercedes and her car hits this pothole and the tire blows out and the rim is damaged. And she calls the auto service called AAA here, and they tow the car to the Mercedes dealer, and then she gets a ride to her office. She arrives about 1 hour late, and everybody says, "Oh my God, are you okay? That must have been so scary, when you hit that turn." They're bringing her coffee and asking. So, it was no big deal. Later that day, the car was returned to the office. It was repaired. It was washed. It was cleaned, and she had insurance to cover most of it. So this was a non-event in her life, and yet everybody around her cared about her and asked her how she was doing. Now we said, imagine one of our hourly workers is coming to work on that same road, and she's driving her $800 15-year-old Toyota Tercel, and she hits that same pothole and her tire blows out and the rim gets damaged. So she has to pull over, and she doesn't have that auto service, right? So she has to call around to a towing company and finally get somebody to come and tow the company to the car away to a tire dealer. And then she doesn't have money to pay for a taxi or Uber, so she has to call some friends, and finally one of them comes and drives her to the office. And she arrives 3 hours late, and she's told the supervisor is waiting for you, and he's really mad. And she goes in and he reprimands her. And he tells her, this is a black mark on your record, and if you have 2 more of these, you will be fired. And at the end of all of that, he tells her, now go and be nice to our customers. Answer the phone and be nice to our customers. Now, this woman's life is falling apart. She has $160 in the bank. She doesn't know how she's going to pay for the car repair. She doesn't know how she will come to work tomorrow. She doesn't know how she will take her children to their daycare. And yet nobody cares. We kick her when she's down. And so John Ratcliffe said, I want to help people deal with these life's potholes. I'm going to create a fund, and it's called Dream On. And he said, apply. If you have any challenge that you're dealing with in your life, please, we want to help. Let us know. So they put that out there. And for 10 days, nothing happened. They said, wow, why are people not responding? The fact is that people are stoic and they're heroic. People are dealing with so much stress and suffering in their life, and yet they don't want to talk about it because they want to appear professional. They want to do their job, right? And finally, after 10 days, they hear from one of their employees. And she writes saying, I'm so sorry, but I need help. She said, my ex-husband stopped paying alimony 2 weeks ago, and my 2 kids and I are living in the car now for 1 week. And I'm sorry, I can't do this to them anymore. I need help. So this came across the desk of the CEO, and he read this, and he said, all I felt was a deep sense of shame. He said, what kind of a leader am I? This woman is a mother. She works full-time in our company. She's homeless for 10 days, and she can't even tell us until now. What kind of a leader am I? And he had tears in his eyes. And of course, they got her into a hotel that night, and they helped her find a new apartment. They told her, we don't have to tell anybody. It's okay. We can keep the secret. She said, nobody has ever done anything like this for me in my entire life. I'm going to tell everybody I know. And they did. And before long, so many people then came forward with their needs. So many people were suffering, and they did something for each of them. By the way, fast forward 2 or 3 years later, the employee turnover was 118% a year. It's down to about 16% a year now. Think about the enormous impact that has on the performance of the business. All of these things actually obviously impact the business in a positive way, but that's not why you do it. You do it because it's the right thing to do to care for people. Another example, I call it confronting social sadness. One of the big sources of sadness in the United States is our prison system, our criminal justice system. 70 million Americans have some kind of criminal record. We have more people in prison than any other country in the world by far, as a percentage of our population and even just over absolute numbers. 70 million Americans have some kind of criminal record, mostly for some minor drug offense, possession, etc. Right? The same number that have a college degree have some kind of a criminal record in their past. And when you apply for a job, there's a box that you have to check. Have you ever been convicted, etc.? And they have to check that box, and then those jobs are not available to them. Right? So once they serve their time, they cannot come back into society. So a company called Greyston Bakery was started by a Buddhist Zen master named Bernie Glassman. And he said, I want to give people a first chance. He said, so many people in our society don't even get a first chance. They're born in a ghetto, they have horrible schools, they're surrounded by drugs and violence, and they have no way to survive other than to go on the street and sell drugs or whatever they do. And then they get caught up in that system and their whole life is thrown away. I want to give them a first chance, not even a second chance. So they started a bakery. And they said, we don't hire people to bake brownies, we bake brownies to hire people. They practice what they call open hiring. They have a list. If you need a job, you put your name on the list, they hire the next person on the list. No background checks, no interviews. They will train you for 9 months and then they'll give you a job. This is an example of one of the young people had been in jail 3 times before this. And finally, he found this company. And now he's a training supervisor, makes $60,000 a year. And he said, if it was not for this company, Greystone, I would be dead or back in jail. He has an apartment. He has a 6-year-old daughter now. This is the impact of business. It's a for-profit business. Every business I'm talking about is for-profit. These are not charities, right? This is how business can create healing in the world. Challenging industry norms. Every industry has sort of standard ways of operating. Consulting. If you're a consultant, the odds are you have to be gone Monday to Friday at a client site, which means your kids will grow up without you. One day you'll wake up and they'll be adults and you don't even know them and they don't know you. And the founders of this company used to work for Accenture. And at one point they said, oh my God, we're married and have children. We don't want that. Okay, but we love consulting. So they said, we're going to start a consulting company in Atlanta where all the clients are local. So you don't have to travel for work. You can be there for your children. In fact, they said children of employees are stakeholders in our company. The way we impact our employees impacts how their children are. So they actually consciously now think of children as stakeholders. And this is so true for every business, right? The way we lead impacts the way people live. So we have to think about that, right? So they changed this. And by the way, now this little company in Atlanta has 3 of the top 20 consultants in the United States working for them. And when they get more business in Chicago, they open an office there. They have an office in Dallas and one in Charlotte, right? So everybody's life and their families are not meant to suffer because of this. Healing communities. There's a wonderful grocery chain in Texas, also in northern Mexico, HEB, the most beloved company in all of Texas, 25 billion in revenues, 100,000 employees. They're a grocery chain that started by the great grandmother of the current chairman, Charles Butt. Right? And this has tremendous mother energy and loving energy. And they're the most beloved company, the largest donor to the state of Texas. They pay their employees better than anybody else. They give them stocks. Their prices are lower than Walmart, but their pay is much, much better and working conditions are much better. And they show up dramatically in times of crisis. When there was a Hurricane Harvey in Texas, before the FEMA and before the Red Cross, HEB shows up. They have a disaster recovery operation. 7 days, 365 days a year, 24/7, and they show up and they reopen their stores, within days after these crises. So somebody tweeted, "I'll see your FEMA and Red Cross, and I'll raise you my Texas grocery store chain." There's tremendous pride and love in that company for this, in that state for this company. And as Charles Butt says to his leaders, let's pay our people as much as possible, not as little as possible. Let's design a business model where we try to pay our people and make sure that they have as good a life as possible. Costco is another company that does that. Our people should be able to lead a decent life and look after their family. Don't view them as a cost to be minimized. Figure out how we create a business where they can actually flourish. Whether we have a healing organization or a hurting organization, like everything else, it comes back to leadership. You cannot have a healing organization if you have a leader who has not healed themselves. One of the things I had to do in the process of writing the healing organization, I was told by 3 different people, you need to work on your own healing before you can write about healing. And I had to take 5 months off and actually experience different things, a Himalayan journey, near the Tibet border with India. I went to the Amazon rainforest in Ecuador and lived with 2 different native peoples, indigenous peoples, the Zapara and the Achuar, for 10 days. I went on a silent retreat, really learned about my connection to nature, about healing myself. Every one of us has some trauma in our life from our childhood and different things that happen. If you don't heal all that, we are going to end up hurting other people because of that. So we have to work on our own healing. If you're a leader and listening to this, please focus on your own healing. It is the most generous thing you can do to other people, is to focus on your own healing, because from that place, you will actually be a positive impact in their lives. The 2 things that are locked away in the corporate closet are unexpressed love. We human beings have a need to care and express our love for each other. But most companies, most cultures don't allow that. So I would say this is the most abundant resource on this planet, unexpressed human caring, because we're not allowed. We don't feel safe to show it. And then the other thing that is locked away is silent suffering. As I said, if you could see a thought bubble over everybody's head in your workplace, or if you walk down the street and you understand what they are dealing with in their life. They have a mother who just got Alzheimer's. They have a child who's addicted to opioids. They have 100,000 other things. so much silent suffering, and they cannot express that to anybody. If we can liberate these from the corporate closet, if we allow that love to come out and allow that suffering to be expressed, we will create a tidal wave of healing inside our organizations, and from there, healing into society. So let's resolve to do that. The new normal that we create coming out of all these crises cannot be the old normal. It has to be a new world. Let's dream it. The future is as we dream it. So let's dream a better dream now, and then let's work together to create that better dream. I would like to end with what we end the healing book on. It's called the Healing Oath. And I have this translated into Spanish. So the first part here is English. But I would like you all, as you're watching this, to put your hand, if you have moved by some of these ideas, put your left hand on your heart and raise your right hand and say these words, primum non nocere, which is Latin. In English, it means first do no harm. And then the Spanish phrase here is operare, I'm probably not going to say this right, mi negocio de forma buena causa. You can say that yourself, right? So that's the idea. Let's not do any harm with our business. Please say it to yourself. Malus eradicare, which means root out evil. And then here's the Spanish phrase. Please say that. Internalize that, absorb that for yourself. And then amor vincit omnia, which means love conquers all. And please say those words to yourself. And from this day forward, if we can all live with, doctors have to take a Hippocratic oath. I believe leaders of any kind should take this kind of an oath. Because the way we lead impacts the way people live. Thank you very much for your time and attention today, and for being here, and for inviting me to be part of this experience with you.
Thank you, Raj, for such an extraordinary presentation, really thoughtful and enriching remarks and reflections that you have shared with us. It is clear and evident how relevant it is nowadays to reflect upon the role of corporations, especially in the light of social, economic, political changes that will happen as a result of the current situation that we're living. Well, having said this, I will now open the room for the Q&A session. It is important to mention that we have received a large number of questions. I will proceed on a first come, first served basis to start reading some of them. I will parallelly translate them into Spanish also, so the audience is aware of them. Bueno, muchas gracias a todos. Ahora vamos a abrir la sesión de preguntas como está previsto en la agenda. Hemos recibido una gran cantidad de preguntas. Procederé a ir leyendo algunas de ellas. So Raj, let's begin with the first question we have received from the participants. So it says, as we are all eager to reactivate our companies and the economy in general, how we avoid incurring in unbalanced behaviors that are unfair to certain stakeholders, which are associated to the traditional idea of capitalism. In Spanish, estamos todos en un proceso de reactivación de las compañías y de la economía en general. En este afán y necesidad de reapertura, ¿cómo podremos evitar incurrir en comportamientos que no estén balanceados y que puedan ser injustos con nuestros grupos de interés?
Yeah, very important question. I think it starts with empathetic listening. It starts with opening our minds and hearts as leaders and wanting to learn what is the experience of each stakeholder with our company. Whether you're an employee at different levels, whether you're a customer, whether you're a supplier, whether you're in the community, etc. And so really creating ways to listen to each of them individually, but also together. One of the processes that I really like for this is called future search. And future search is a way, it's a 3 or 4 day process. We bring all of the stakeholders together. Okay, the whole entire system, stakeholder system in one room. So you have maybe 300-400 people. You have, depending on the size of the company, you have employees at every level, right? Represented there. You have customers of many different kinds. Everybody is there. Board members, executives, even social activists, out there, members of unions, etc. And you then work together to dream about the future. You listen to each other deeply. You talk about what are the greatest needs, how we're going to move forward. And then you can actually prototype some ideas and put people together into cross-functional groups, etc. right? Because ultimately we're all human beings. Doesn't matter if I'm an employee or a customer, etc. I mean, I'm a human being with needs, and how can this company best help me heal? How can I help the company? See, it becomes a two-way street when we operate like this. Not just what can the company do for them, it's like what can they do for the company? They want the company to succeed, and flourish, right? So I think creating that kind of mechanism, I think there's a parallel methodology called appreciative inquiry out of Case Western University. David Cooperrider, who's a friend of mine, has created that. That also is the similar idea, right? Bring the whole system together, and then let's dream and design the future together. And then when we implement those ideas, we don't have any resistance from anybody because we are already there, part of co-creating it. And that's, I think, what we need to do. As soon as we start coming out of this, we have to start crafting and designing. We should be already thinking about it, right? Right now, we are sort of responding, but then we have to recover, and then we have to reimagine and recreate the better future, right? As Charles Eisenstein's book says, a more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. So let's create that together. It's not just the leader has to come up with all this. We can do that all together.
Very clear, Raj. So we have another question here. It says, what do you think we must learn from the current crisis? ¿Qué aprendizajes considera usted nos deja esta crisis?
There's so much to learn. Every crisis, the Chinese character for crisis is the same as opportunity. In many ways, this virus is kind of a medicine. It's waking us up. It is pointing out the dangers that exist in the way we live. I talked about factory farms earlier. Not only are they inhumane, they are breeding grounds for viruses and all kinds of potential future pandemics. Right? We had the chicken flu and other things that came in the past, but unless we change those things, this pandemic and this virus is, of course, dangerous and lethal, but compared to other viruses, it is not as high. There are many, many more dangerous pandemics that can come, right? But this is showing us how we come together. How do we create isolation? How do we cooperate? How do we activate? How do we make sure we have enough supplies, medical equipment, all of the things. This is almost like in baseball, we have spring training, right? For 2 months before we actually have the regular season. This is like a training ground for future crises. Okay, and we have learned cooperation. We have learned rapid activation. We have learned to think outside the box, right? All kinds. We've opened our hearts as leaders and others to each other. Human beings are recognizing and thanking each other and celebrating each other, etc. We were taking for granted all the freedoms and privileges we had. Now we will appreciate those, right? So I think there's a lot of gifts here that we can take, right? And I believe that's true of all of the problems we're going through, even the social unrest we're going through. President Obama spoke yesterday about this crisis we're in right now with the social unrest. And he said, this is actually a very positive thing. The way society has responded, the way we see not only Black people protesting, but there's majority white people in most of those groups, right? And it's multiracial. It's very different than the 1968 riots, right? This is very different. So again, there is an opportunity now to heal, right? There's a thing in the medical profession, when you break a bone, it actually heals back even stronger than if it never broke in the first place. So I think we have the potential here, if we respond in the right way, that we can be much stronger going forward, much more resilient. And of course, the biggest problem is ahead of us, which is climate change. We have to have the same sense of urgency and the same sense of global collective action for that, which can affect billions of people, right? That we are having for this crisis, which is only affecting a few million.
Thank you, Raj. We have a question here that was sent from our sustainability director. It says, what kind of leadership is necessary within our institutions, both public and private, in order to recover from the current crisis? Which qualities must we cultivate within ourselves and seek for in all leaders? ¿Qué tipo de liderazgo considera usted necesario para nuestras instituciones, tanto públicas como privadas, para salir adelante de esta crisis? ¿Qué cualidades se deben cultivar y deberían tener nuestros líderes durante esta coyuntura?
Yeah, I think this is the most important thing. We need conscious leadership, right? Now, what does that mean? A leader who views their position as with power and privilege, right? That they see that the people they lead are there to help them achieve their personal goals. That's not a leader, that's a tyrant, right? A true leader is selfless. What is the opposite of selfless? Is selfish. So when you have a selfish person become a leader, what do? And we have people like that. We have a leader in our country like that. They view other people simply to feed their own ego and achieve their own personal goals. They're not there to serve. A true leader has gone beyond the self. You know, Abraham Maslow talked about our levels of development, and the highest was self-actualization. Well, you know, Viktor Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning, talked about a level beyond that, which is self-transcendence. We have to have leaders who think beyond the self. It's not about me. The greatest leaders in human history, Lincoln, Gandhi, Mandela, King, have transcended their own personal agendas. They're about serving. They're about taking people to a better place, creating a vision for what is possible. A great leader can see beyond what other people can see. And then how do we get there? The strategy of how do we get there, right? So selfless is the word describing those leaders, but also it stands, as I said earlier, strength. We need strength. You cannot be a leader without strength. You need to have what we call personal power. It's not positional power that comes from the title, right? Gandhi never had a title in his life, but he had tremendous power. Martin Luther King had tremendous personal power. Nelson Mandela, until he became president, all he had was personal power because of his moral authority, his courage, his values, right? His ethical principles. So we need to have tremendous strength, and then enthusiasm and love. See, strength and love must go together. Strength without love is tyranny. Love without strength is ineffective. So the greatest leaders have combined tremendous strength with a great capacity for love. All the leaders I mentioned. The leaders who are only about strength in the last century, Hitler and Mussolini and Stalin and Mao and so many others. And we have people like that in the world today, right? In Philippines, I would say in Brazil, in the US, many other countries, right? They do not embody love, right, and service. So strength, enthusiasm, love, flexibility, enthusiasm, right? And then long-term orientation, and then emotional intelligence, systems intelligence, and spiritual intelligence, understanding and meaning and purpose. The summary phrase, and I'm actually going to write a book about this in a couple of years, is the ideal leader is what we call the wise fool of tough love. That brings in the four energies I talked about earlier. Wisdom, right? The elder energy, foolishness or joy, the childlike playfulness. That's where creativity comes from. That's where humor, laughter, right? Joy come from child energy. So if you become only about wisdom and you forget about child energy, you cannot be innovative, you can't be creative, and you certainly cannot have fun. So you need the wise and the foolishness. You need tough and love. Martin Luther King said we must be tough-minded and tender-hearted at the same time, right? So to me, a whole human being is somebody who has developed all of those qualities, their higher self, their child self, their masculine side, their feminine side, right? So they are now a whole human being who's a wise fool of tough love. And then they can have the flexibility to show up with the right energy in the right situation. You know, as a parent, we know that if something happens in a family, you don't always show up with love, or always show up with toughness, or always with, you know, depending on the situation, you might have to come up with humor, or you might have to come up with gentleness, or you might have to be strict, etc. Right? So you have to have the flexibility as a leader to show up in the right way, right? And great leaders have done that. You know, they inspire us when they need to inspire us, they warn us when they need to warn us, etc. And they comfort us when we need to be comforted.
Raj, I have another question here. It says, do you think capitalism will be threatened after this pandemic? ¿Considera usted que el capitalismo puede estar amenazado después de que salgamos de esta crisis?
Yes, capitalism was already being threatened before this crisis. You know, I mentioned all of the populist movements. I mentioned all of from the left and the right. I mentioned the data in terms of percentage of people having dissatisfaction, etc. And the danger there, as I said, is we can throw the whole thing out, but what's the alternative? See, capitalism is free markets and free people. Let's go back to basic principles, but let's look at the consciousness behind it, right? So we need capitalism, but we need capitalism with a conscience. We need capitalism with consciousness. We need capitalism with conscientiousness, right? All of those things, right? Everything has to evolve. Our journey on this planet is of constantly evolving and waking up. And we have to apply that to capitalism. And as I said, capitalism and democracy, and in the United States, if you look at the way these things evolved, it was hyper-masculine, right? When the United States was being formed, so this is the laboratory for both these ideas to grow and then export to the rest of the world, right? Capitalism, the idea came from Adam Smith, but it was really grown over here. And democracy, this was the first real representative democracy in the world. But when they were designing this system of government, and they were trying to create sort of a federal system with the 13 colonies, but also having some central thing, and they wanted, you know, the balance of power and so forth. The only model they found, they looked in history, they looked around the world, there was no model. The only model existed in something called the Iroquois Confederacy in the northeast of the United States, where 6 different Native Indian American tribes had come together 200 years before that. And they were always warring with each other, but then they came together under a peacemaker. And he said, why are we always fighting? Let's come together, create a confederation so we can live in peace with each other. Each of us can have our own language and our own traditions, but we can then also come together and deal with things that actually affect all of us. So they created a federal system. And there are 3 different branches, the equivalent of what we have, the presidency, the Congress, and the Supreme Court. And they have many mechanisms. So they borrowed a lot of that, you know, Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson borrowed a lot of that as they were creating the US system. But there was one piece of that that they decided not to, which is that the leader of the Confederacy was always selected by women. It was a council of mothers and grandmothers who picked the male leader. So the leader was always a man, but always selected by women. And if he was too warlike, or if he didn't think about the well-being of everybody, or if he didn't think long-term enough, their tradition was that the leader, the chief, must think about the next 7 generations for every decision that he makes. So if he was violating any of that, then they could remove him and put somebody else in, right? So when the US leaders were designing the system, they borrowed everything, but they actually left out the feminine part. In fact, women were not given the right to vote. So when John Adams was part of the constitutional, writing the Constitution, his wife, Abigail Adams, wrote to him. These are very famous letters. I've got them in my book. She said, please, sir, remember the ladies when you are writing this. Please do not create a system in which women and ladies are kept out and not given any voice, right? Because then it said men left to their own devices tend to become tyrants. And he, of course, dismissed that. And he said, oh, madam, women have all the power anyway. We don't need to give them more power. So the fact is that women did not get the right to vote for 140 years in the United States after they created a freedom-based society. Women could not own property. They could not inherit property. They could not start their own business. It always had to be the father or the husband or brother who did that with them, right? So think about that. We left out the feminine entirely from our leadership, our government system. And as I said, capitalism, we left out the feminine side, caring, what Adam Smith talked about, right? So democracy and capitalism both evolved in a hyper-masculine path, which is why they have so much toxic energy inside them, right? Which is why we have so much political division, which is why we had, remember, there was no socialism, there was no Marxism, there was no communism before there was capitalism. It was only the abuses of capitalism that gave rise to militant unions first, right? Because employees were being treated so badly. And that then led to Marx to write what he wrote, which then led to socialism and ultimately communism. So those systems that created so much suffering and tens of millions of people died in the last 100 years. Those only arose in response to lower consciousness capitalism. We would have never had that. So if we elevate capitalism, there's no need for socialism if we elevate capitalism, because we will treat people with respect and dignity, and there will be decency for everybody. So yes, capitalism can be threatened, but capitalism can also have a rebirth. This can be the whole new emergence of a different way of being, and that's what we've been about. There is a group now in the US called Imperative 21. There are 6 different groups like Conscious Capitalism, B Team, B Corps, Inclusive Capitalism, etc. have come together under the Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, I think, and created Imperative 21 to say we're all going to work together to forward this agenda. Just Capital is another one of those.
Thank you, Raj. We have room for one last question, being very rigorous with our agenda, before we give the word to Jorge Mario so he could deliver his closing remarks. So this last question says, The social protests and riots in some Latin American countries have generated some stress in the productive sectors. Under your theory of conscious capitalism, what kind of solutions could be offered to those who remain dissatisfied? Las protestas sociales en Latinoamérica han generado estrés en los sectores productivos. Bajo la filosofía del capitalismo consciente, ¿qué tipo de soluciones pueden ofrecerse para aquellos que aún permanecen insatisfechos?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is to treat them with respect and listen to them with your open heart. See, what happened, one of the things I learned when I went to the Amazon rainforest and I was with those shamans there, they said, you know, in the West, you only deal with each other at this level, okay? Head, intellect. But we need to connect at this level, the body, the spirit, the soul, and the heart. So we need to connect with each other as human beings. We need to listen to their grievances, which are real. I mean, people don't do these things, you know, just to have fun. So we need to listen to them, and then we need to work with them to co-create a better way of being. Okay, and then if that requires some regulatory changes in the government, if that requires the government to do certain things differently, etc., we all need to work together across sectors, right, to make sure those things don't happen. I mean, Chile is a success story of capitalism, but at the same time has tremendous disparities, right? So the highest per capita income on average, but that actually hides the fact that there's a huge gap. And therefore, Chile became sort of the first, you know, I think, to erupt in a big way. And of course, there's many, many other countries that are suffering as well. So again, it has to be inclusive. You know, conscious capitalism is inclusive. It is long-term. It's caring, right? And it's giving a voice to those people who did not have a voice before. So we need to feel their pain. We need to understand where it comes from, and then we need to work towards healing. We need to reduce the sources of that suffering that exist, and then we need to figure out how do we create more joy in the workplace. It's all possible. I mean, as I said in the book, there are 25 stories of companies that are doing that. One of them, by the way, is from Costa Rica. It's called FIFCO, the largest company in Costa Rica. It's an incredible story over the last 12, 15 years of transforming completely and healing every single aspect of their business.
Thank you, Raj, for all of your answers. We have left behind a large number of questions that could not be addressed because we're running short of time right now. Now I will give the word to Jorge Mario Velásquez, CEO of Grupo Argos, so he can deliver some closing remarks. Muchas gracias a todos. Les voy a dar la palabra ahora a Jorge Mario Velásquez para que nos dé sus comentarios de cierre.
First of all, Raj, we truly value and appreciate and admire the relevant messages to carry on this conference. I really appreciate enriching, enlightening, and I certainly think it was very opportune for the moment of the human being and our society. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Quisiera, ante todo, agradecer la presencia de tantas personas que nos acompañan aquí. Atrevido sería tratar de sintetizar la presentación. Creo que Raj nos ha dejado unas profundas reflexiones sobre las cuales quiero simplemente enfatizar en 2 o 3 puntos. La primera, nos llama la atención, Raj, en que lo que ha exacerbado la pandemia hoy es un proceso que venía construyéndose desde hace años de descontento social, no solamente en América Latina, en países emergentes, sino en sociedades desarrolladas. Y posiblemente cuando la humanidad supere esta crisis, que estoy seguro que lo haremos, ojalá más pronto que tarde, van a venir reflexiones muy profundas sobre el capitalismo, sobre el modelo político que queremos, sobre el rol de las empresas. Me parece que hoy Raj nos deja acertadamente varios mensajes. El primero es de que el capitalismo es free markets, it's free people, que el capitalismo es una forma que si la elevamos en conciencia para hacer de nuestras empresas y nuestros sistemas una organización que tenga una visión holística de distintos stakeholders y, como bien él dice, que no haga daño, que se encargue de crear bien, vamos a poder socialmente y políticamente fortalecer la apreciación, el papel y la importancia de la empresa privada, que como bien nos mostraron, ha venido siendo cuestionada en múltiples escenarios. Esa, creo yo, es la mejor respuesta que el sector empresarial, que los líderes empresariales podemos dar a ese cuestionamiento sobre si la empresa privada es o no es un motor de generación de bienestar social. Efectivamente lo es. Nos debemos sentir orgullosos de ser empresarios, nos debemos sentir orgullosos del 1.700.000 empresas que hay en Colombia, grandes, pequeñas y medianas, que trabajan todos los días para emplear, para pagar impuestos, para crecer. Y creo que si generalizamos y expandimos este concepto de que la empresa socialmente responsable, de que la empresa hecha con sentido de impactar positivamente múltiples grupos de interés, es la forma adecuada de construir una sociedad que seguramente va a entrar en momentos en polarizaciones políticas, de nacionalismos y de extremos, de derechas o de izquierdas, donde el sector privado y especialmente los líderes empresariales tendremos que jugar un rol muy importante que parta desde el ejemplo. La segunda reflexión que quisiera compartir, que me llamó poderosamente la atención, es respecto a la importancia de potenciar y exaltar y hacer cada vez más relevante ese rol del liderazgo de conceptos femeninos. Yo quiero llamar la atención porque ahora cuando hice alguna referencia a las cifras de desempleo, si ustedes bajan un poquito en el detalle, se van a dar cuenta que la cifra de desempleo entre las mujeres es sustancialmente más alta que entre los hombres. Entonces, cuando estamos hablando de cifras de 19,8% de desempleo en Colombia, estamos hablando de cifras de 24% de desempleo en las mujeres. Y cuando miramos incluso la distribución del desempleo entre las zonas urbanas y rurales, la inequidad es aún mayor. Y yo creo que Raj nos deja unos pensamientos muy interesantes acerca de poder balancear ese sentido femenino, esa capacidad de mirar el liderazgo sensible, esa capacidad de tomar todo lo bueno de esa combinación. No es una polarización, no es una división entre hombres y mujeres, entre viejos y jóvenes. Es esa fuente de energías que produce la diversidad como palanca, no solamente de inclusión, sino de generación de riqueza social y económica. Soy un convencido que en la diversidad, no solamente como expresión de género, sino de backgrounds, de pensamiento político, de formación, de inclinación sexual, es donde está la mayor fuente de potencia para las sociedades y para las organizaciones. Finalmente, resaltaría esa invitación que Raj nos hace también a liderar desde la empresa privada, que puede hacer mucho bien, puede hacer mucho mal, pero puede hacer mucho bien. Y a liderar con un concepto humanístico, a que el líder sea sensible, a que muestre el amor, que muestre la fortaleza, la visión, la determinación para afrontar los retos que tiene la gestión empresarial, pero que sea un ser sensible. Yo particularmente creo que el liderazgo empresarial, el liderazgo de la empresa privada va a ser fundamental para apoyar la salida exitosa de esta crisis que estamos afrontando como sociedad y como país. De manera que con esto, simplemente agradecer nuevamente a Raj por sus comentarios, agradecerles a ustedes por el tiempo. Espero, y ese era el único propósito, que esta conversación deje sembradas semillas en el interior de cada ser humano para que las aplique bajo su mejor convicción a construir más fortaleza del sector empresarial responsable y mejor sociedad para todos. De manera que muchas gracias por acompañarnos y un feliz día. Raj, thank you very much again.
Thank you really from all of you for organizing this event, and thank you especially Jose Mario and Grupo Argos.
It's our pleasure, Raj. Thank you very much. Expect to see you personally soon. Thank you.
Y así damos por terminado nuestro evento. Muchísimas gracias a todos por acompañarnos. Un feliz día. Hasta luego y gracias.
De una pista de vuelo a la pista de abrazos más grande del mundo. De millones de metros construidos a millones de familias que hoy ven las estrellas más cerca. De conectar vías con otras a conectar un hola con un bienvenido. Siéntete como en casa. De 250 megavatios solares a más de 6 millones de árboles sembrados para respirar un aire más limpio, más puro. De eso se trata Transformar, de invertir en proyectos que cambian la vida de las personas, de innovar aportando valor a la sociedad y de crear más oportunidades para todos. Grupo Argos. Inversiones que transforman.